Today, we're going to dive right into the player leaderboard for the most days as number 1. And the player who has claimed the top spot is none other than Nightsong from Living Flame EU. With an impressive display of skill and strategy, Nightsong has managed to outplay the competition and secure the number 1 position. But let's not forget about our runner-up. Just a few steps behind, we have EnigmXX, also from Living Flame EU. EnigmXX has been giving a tough fight, proving to be a formidable contender. The competition is heating up, and the leaderboard is constantly changing. In the balanced Druid category, Sinti from Wild Growth EU in the guild Blessed X holds the top spot for the second day with a DPS of 1069.3, maintaining his reign since yesterday. Innate from Crusader Strike US in the guild Humbertism follows closely behind with a DPS of 1051.2, while Hotmiss from Living Flame EU in the guild 99 rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1029.8. The remaining top 10 for today are Blazarus, Centripetal, Adriu, OK Bloomer, Shaw, Rooftralanx, and Loria. In the Feral Druid category, Parse Police from Living Flame EU in the guild Silver Saga continues holds the top spot for the 5th consecutive day with a DPS of 1466.8, demonstrating consistent performance and dominance. Following closely in second place is BGTD from Living Flame EU in the guild B Tribe with a DPS of 1453.6, and in third place, Lawsuit from Living Flame EU in the guild Silver Saga continues with a DPS of 1436.2. The remaining top 10 for today are Giny, Africantiger, Cyril, Swagdonald, Caddy Peace, Lil Claws, and Kates, each showcasing their prowess in this competitive field. In the Guardian Druid category, NMX from Lone Wolf US in the guild Chinese Textile Machine continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 848.2, a position he's maintained for over a week. Following closely, Killjoy Puli from Living Flame EU in the guild Sapan Kalasura holds the second place with a DPS of 831.1. The third spot is held by Cadetet from Living Flame EU in the guild B Tribe with a DPS of 823.2. The remaining top 10 players for today are Sudo Apjit, Ankler, Minetsis, Sayaju, Yuan Feng, Pumpex, and Giny. In the Melee Hunter category, Tree Ranger from Living Flame US, representing the Guild Cartel, continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 1556.9, a position they've maintained for over a week. Algi from Living Flame EU in the guild Den Dansky Method follows closely with a DPS of 1514.9, while Johnnysons from Lone Wolf EU in the guild Oxygen rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1507.9. The remaining top 10 melee hunters for today are Resorth, Yangla Chi Chi, Zatara, Cornshot, Miniaros, Waffle Freeze, and Tenuki. In the ranged hunter category, Isoled Out from Crusader Strike US in the guild Footlong Party Dog Saad continues to dominate with a DPS of 1432.2, holding the top spot for 2 consecutive days. Coming in second is Tubbalumpkin from Living Flame US in the guild Smooth, maintaining a DPS of 1349.7. The third spot is held by Fragmaster from Living Flame EU in the guild B Tribe, with a DPS of 1338.6. These players have shown exceptional performance in their respective guilds. The remaining top 10 for today are Bumrush, Murith, QIA-CDI, Disio Floorberries, Locky, and Potato Pilot. In the Arcane Mage category, Musakas from Lone Wolf EU in the guild and Not Sure maintains the top spot for the 2nd consecutive day with a DPS of 726.1, an impressive feat. Digidoo from Wild Growth EU in the guild Resist holds steady at 2nd place with a DPS of 677.4, while Cuties from Living Flame EU remains in 3rd place with a DPS of 631.4. The remaining top 10 for today are Muju, Insimage, Imloxo, Dazpianad, Greats, Kusin, and Mylene. In the Fire Mage category, Delano from Crusader Strike US in the guild Parse continues to hold the top spot for the 3rd consecutive day with a DPS of 1195.3. Coming in second is QIA Jujia from Yexing Quan UTW in the guild Yuan Quan QI, maintaining a DPS of 1177.8. Mellowish from Wild Growth US holds the 3rd position with a DPS of 1158.8. The remaining top 10 for today are Tumu Charmer, Dukanem, Migisula, PM, Sest Maltazar, and G. Lizy, each showcasing impressive stats in their respective placements. In the Frost Mage category, Watchtome from Lone Wolf EU continues to hold the top spot for the 7th consecutive day, boasting a DPS of 1039.4. Following closely is Obi from Living Flame EU in the guild link logs, maintaining the 2nd position with a DPS of 991.9. The 3rd spot is held by Clankum from Living Flame US with a DPS of 987.5. The remaining top 10 for today are TDMZ from Crusader Strike Us, Triaipo from Lone Wolf EU, Xiangming Yu Ni Zhen Mei from Xiangming Lian TW, Jaboshi from Crusader Strike EU, QIQE from Living Flame EU, Satika from Lone Wolf EU, and Diz from Wild Growth Us. In the Protection Paladin category, the top player remains unchanged, with He'er Mei Sai from Xiangming Lian in the guild Xuancheng holding the position for over a week now, boasting a DPS of 1237.7. One Punch from Living Flame in the guild Cartel follows closely in 2nd place with a DPS of 1229.3, while Fakyaz from Lone Wolf in the guild Lethal rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1221.3. The remaining top 10 for today are Farvold, Boysuthik, Fat, and Ming Duaz Gonf and Mengyu Fuguang. In the Retribution Paladin category, Pettery from Wild Growth EU in the guild Dragonslayers holds the top spot for the 5th consecutive day, maintaining a DPS of 1372.8. Coming in 2nd is Tyrion Polduring from Godon Nogde KR in the guild Il Renijib with a DPS of 1336.7. The 3rd spot is claimed by Akanos from Crusader Strike US in the guild Discovery Monkeys with a DPS of 1331.9. The remaining top 10 players for today are Elf Chapo, Ji Ziyuzhu, Mu Lingzhu, Hinxiao Didaju Hua, Jinix, Ibadet, and Gao Da. In the Shadow Priest category, Waga from Living Flame EU in the guild link logs continues to dominate with a DPS of 948.9, maintaining the top spot for over a week now. Close behind, we have HL from Living Flame EU in the guild Shorvers with a DPS of 942.6, and Flayed from Shadowstrike AU, .U.S in the guild Male Models with a DPS of 940.6. These 3 have consistently held their position since yesterday. The remaining top 10 for today are Theradrin from Wild Growth Us at 4th place, Tissania from Wild Growth EU at 5th, Kasupo from Godo Nugdi KR at 6th, Valinor from Wild Growth EU at 7th, Case Max from Lone Wolf US at 8th, Eauxi from Crusader Strike Us at 9th, and Skusho from Living Flame EU rounding out the list at 10th place. In the DPS Rogue category, Body Snatcher from Shadowstrike in the guild Fatality has held the top spot for 3 consecutive days, boasting a DPS of 1507.1. Close behind, Jushui Dai from Xiangming Lian in the guild Xuancheng maintains 2nd place with a DPS of 1498.6. Rounding out the top 3 is Karina from Godon Nugde in the guild Rundikyo with a DPS of 1493.1. The remaining top 10 for today are Sylv, Tiriella, Shriella, Shrey, Reminder, Narangai, Rotterdam, and Ionel. In the Tank Rogue category, Nerf Assassin from Gyu Lang TW in the guild Nerf Shadow Club continues to dominate with a DPS of 1096.4, holding the top spot for over a week now. Nova from Living Flame EU follows in 2nd place with a DPS of 1062.4, and Sketcher from Crusader Strike US in the guild We The Ops rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1034.6. These players have shown exceptional skill and strategy, consistently outperforming their peers. The remaining top 10 for today are Scion, Twisted Step, Dean Pete, Haquin, Wool, Laylas, and Lit, who are all pushing hard to climb the ranks. In the Elemental Shaman category, Hexmother from Lone Wolf US in the guild Hunks continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 1165.9, a position he's maintained for over a week. Close behind, Bangog Dongsamjumog from Godoan Nugde KR holds the 2nd position with a DPS of 1115.0, and Gag from Living Flame EU in the guild Dendansky Maytoad rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1111.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Thili, Needmilk Lihipiraka, Lava Blurst, Elementalman, Nature Shock, and Shimandani. In the Enhancement Shaman category, NA from Living Flame EU in the guild Dendansky Meadow has held the top position for 2 consecutive days with a DPS of 1596.9. Aopatesham from Lone Wolf US in the guild Strictly Business follows closely in second place with a DPS of 1550.6, maintaining his position from yesterday. The third spot is held by Bosseter from Living Flame EU in the guild Summers, delivering a DPS of 1516.9. The remaining top 10 players for today are Zobe, Boinky, BDD, Cryptenhance, Chad Handsomed, Fakeban, and This Guy Miss Ass. In the Tank Shaman category, Nightsong from Living Flame EU in the guild Summers continues to dominate with a DPS of 1147.5, holding the top spot for an impressive 7 consecutive days. Close behind is Iwo from Living Flame EU in the guild Trash, who has steadily increased his DPS from 840.6 to 1123.4 over the past week. The third spot is held by Vistalo from Wild Growth EU in the guild Conspiracy, maintaining a DPS of 1013.1. The remaining top 10 for today are Shamsky, Walks, Koshaman, Gearshaman, Tyhex, Salfair, and Repo. In the DPS Warlock category, Taco from Shadowstrike AU in the guild Angles continues to dominate the leaderboard with a DPS of 1203.6, maintaining the top spot for over a week now. Following closely is Wayne Warlock from Shengming Lian TW in the guild Chung Nuo, delivering a DPS of 1169.4, and Amayeto from Lone Wolf US rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1160.7. The remaining top 10 for today are Pantslock, Strawberry, Benzalock, Firamatic, Zhengudong Maitre, and Pantses. In the Tank Warlock category, Enigmzax from Living Flame EU in the guild Pepident continues to dominate with a DPS of 1045.0, maintaining the top position for over a week now. Lobster from Living Flame US in the guild Mudhut Elite is hot on his heels with a DPS of 1040.2, while Dinosaur from Wild Growth US in the guild Golden Girls rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1005.1. The remaining top 10 for today are GigaProMax, Barot, TikToxic, Kyric Meta, Gian Renamdo, Havoc, and HND. In the Fury Warrior category, Sopato from Lone Wolf EU in the guild Ego continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 1801.5, maintaining this position for a remarkable 6 consecutive days. Mokpo from Godowan Nogde KR in the guild Il Renegib follows closely behind in second place with a DPS of 1658.9, and Jiaki GE from Gulang TW rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1626.1. The remaining top 10 for today are Zspdiobu, Septamiov, Chayal, Londo Bishka 8th, Barbala, and Pimosis. In the Protection Warrior category, Suffrix from Crusader Strike US in the guild Exhausted continues to reign supreme with a DPS of 1453.2, holding this position for 2 consecutive days. Following closely is Bodil from Lone Wolf US in the guild Lethal with a DPS of 1436.3, and Betane from Godo and Nugde KR in the guild Il Renegib with a DPS of 1418.9. The remaining top 10 for today are Threat, Agony, Kabir, Duo Luasazu, Inzaki, Mani, and Matrix.